The Hindenburg Airship. The Hindenburg was a marvel of engineering, a floating palace in the sky capable of crossing the Atlantic in days. It symbolized luxury, speed, and modernity. It was also filled with hydrogen. On May 6, 1937, as the airship attempted to dock in New Jersey, static electricity likely ignited the hydrogen gas. Within seconds, the Hindenburg was engulfed in flames. 36 people died. The disaster was captured on film. The images shocked the world. Airship travel ended almost overnight. The technology worked beautifully until physics intervened. Hydrogen was chosen despite known risks because helium was scarce and politically restricted. The Hindenburg wasn't destroyed by sabotage. It wasn't bad luck. It was destroyed by a calculated risk that failed publicly and spectacularly. The airship represented humanity's desire to conquer distance. Its destruction reminded the world that elegance means nothing when safety is compromised by convenience.
The big ship warps in, and the ground crews rush for the mooring lines. In another 10 minutes or so, the great aircraft would have been snugly docked. But as the passengers crowded the windows to watch, a roar and a burst of flame near the big tail fins turned the ship into a flaming inferno.
Titan Submersible. The Titan Submersible was marketed as innovation, a lightweight experimental vessel designed to take paying passengers nearly 4,000 meters down to the Titanic wreck. But deep-sea pressure is unforgiving, and the ocean does not care about ambition. Unlike traditional submersibles, Titan used a carbon fiber hull, strong in theory, but unproven under repeated extreme pressure cycles. Engineers warned that carbon fiber can weaken invisibly. Critics questioned the lack of independent safety certification. Those concerns were dismissed. On its final dive, contact was lost less than 2 hours after descent. For days, the world watched and waited. Then, the truth emerged. The submersible hadn't failed slowly. It imploded instantly. The pressure at that depth is equivalent to the weight of the Eiffel Tower pressing down on a human body. Death would have occurred in milliseconds. There was no time to panic, no chance to react. The passengers were killed by a machine designed to push boundaries without fully respecting them. Some call it an unavoidable risk of exploration. Others see it as a warning about ego, shortcuts, and ignoring expertise. The Titan didn't lose to the ocean. It lost to human overconfidence. Space Shuttle Challenger. On January 28, 1986, millions of people watched the Space Shuttle Challenger lift off live on television. It was meant to be a symbol of progress. Instead, it became one of the most haunting images in modern history. Just 73 seconds after launch, Challenger disintegrated. The cause was a rubber O-ring seal that failed in cold temperatures. Engineers had warned that low temperatures could compromise the seal. Management overruled them. Flames escaped the booster rocket, burned through structural supports, and triggered a catastrophic breakup. The crew cabin remained intact briefly, arcing toward the ocean before impact. All 7 astronauts died. What makes Challenger especially tragic isn't just the failure, it's that it was predicted. Internal memos documented the risk. Engineers begged for delays. The launch went ahead anyway due to schedule pressure and public expectations. The shuttle wasn't destroyed by space, it was destroyed by decisions. Challenger revealed a culture where warnings were normalized, risk was minimized on paper, and dissent was quietly ignored. The technology worked exactly as designed. The system around it failed. The explosion marked a moment when humanity was reminded that even our greatest machines are only as safe as the choices behind them. Fukushima Nuclear Meltdown. In March 2011, a massive earthquake struck Japan, followed by a tsunami. The Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant shut down as designed. But the real danger came after. The tsunami flooded backup generators. Without power, cooling systems failed. Reactors overheated. Hydrogen gas built up. Explosions tore through reactor buildings. Radioactive material was released into the environment. Thousands were evacuated. Entire towns were abandoned. The death toll from radiation exposure remains debated, but the psychological and economic damage was immense. Investigations later showed that the plant's seawall was inadequate. Risks were known but dismissed as unlikely. The disaster wasn't purely natural. It was compounded by human assumptions about safety margins. Fukushima proved that even when technology functions correctly at first, the systems around it must be prepared for the worst-case scenario. Nature delivered the trigger. Human planning determined the scale. The meltdown wasn't caused by malice. It was caused by believing unlikely meant impossible. The Halifax Explosion. On December 6, 1917, 2 ships collided in the Halifax harbor. One was carrying explosives, thousands of tons of high-grade military munitions. The collision caused a fire, but few understood the danger. People gathered to watch. 20 minutes later, the ship exploded. The The blast was the largest man-made explosion before the atomic age. A shockwave flattened the city. Windows shattered miles away. Entire neighborhoods vanished. Nearly 2,000 people were killed. Over 9,000 were injured. The explosion created a tsunami. Fires raged for days. Survivors wandered through wreckage, unable to recognize their own streets. This disaster wasn't inevitable. Hazard protocols were poorly enforced. Communication failures delayed evacuation. The technology, explosives designed for war, was never meant to sit unguarded in a civilian harbor. Halifax proved that human creations don't need to be malicious to be deadly. Sometimes, all it takes is proximity, misjudgment, and silence. The city was rebuilt, but the lesson remains buried beneath the streets that once vanished in a single, human-made flash. Chernobyl. It was supposed to be a routine safety test. On April 26, 1986, engineers at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant attempted to simulate a power outage. Instead, they triggered the worst nuclear disaster in human history. The reactor design was unstable at low power, but the operators either didn't know or were pressured to proceed anyway. Safety systems were disabled. Control rods were pulled out too far. The reactor began to surge. Then, in seconds, everything went wrong. A massive power spike caused fuel rods to rupture. Steam pressure built uncontrollably. Two explosions tore the reactor apart, blasting the roof off and exposing the radioactive core directly to the atmosphere. Graphite ignited, sending radioactive particles across Europe. Firefighters arrived without protective gear. They touched glowing debris, unaware it was lethal. Many died within weeks from acute radiation sickness. Entire cities were evacuated. Some never returned. The official death toll remains disputed. Some say dozens, others estimate tens of thousands over decades due to cancer and long-term exposure. Chernobyl wasn't caused by nature. It wasn't an accident in the traditional sense. It was the result of human design flaws, political pressure, and the belief that technology could not fail until it did, catastrophically. The Molten Iron Tank Disaster. In 1919, Boston housed a massive steel tank filled with over 2 million gallons of molten molasses, a byproduct of industrial alcohol production. The tank was rushed into service, poorly tested and visibly leaking. Residents joked that the structure groaned and creaked like it was alive. Engineers ignored the warnings. No proper stress calculations were performed. The steel was too thin. Rivets were faulty. Temperature changes caused pressure to rise inside the tank. On January 15th, the structure finally gave way. The tank exploded without warning. A 25-foot-high wave of boiling molasses surged through the streets at highway speed. Buildings were ripped from foundations. Trains were knocked off tracks. People were trapped, crushed, or suffocated as the sticky liquid hardened around them. 21 people died. Over 150 were injured. Some victims took days to recover from the wreckage, their bodies glued in place by cooling syrup. This wasn't a natural disaster. It wasn't unavoidable. It was caused by greed, rushed construction, and the belief that testing and safety checks were optional. The disaster permanently changed engineering standards in the United States. But that change came too late for those buried in molasses by a tank that never should have existed.